No rational podcaster likes spending money needlessly. But every day, podcasters make choices on and around their shows without understanding the underlying costs to their podcast or themselves. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. When you mention a product or a service on your podcast, that act has value. Big value, small value, doesn't matter. It's value, which is why ads and sponsorships cost money. But that same action, mentioning something, has a cost. And it's a cost that you pay with your reputation. Now, this entire episode is not about advertising. I want to assuage your fears first off. It's somewhat about advertising because most rational listeners know that when they hear an ad on your podcast, it's a paid-for exchange. You're not doing that out of the goodness of your heart. So you are kind of required to read a script and say things. However, that does not mean that they'll forgive you if you choose to advertise a crappy product on your podcast. They won't. You know that, right? And so that's why there's a cost, or I guess better, or that the reality of that cost, or the risk of that cost is then offset by the revenue the advertiser gives you, the podcaster. But again, this is not about advertising. That's just where we start thinking about this. And we can take that thinking and expand it, because this is really about all of the other products and services that you mention on your show for free. They all come with a cost. Now, you might use Patreon the way that I use Buy Me a Coffee, that I'll mention here in a little bit, right? And we're trying to drive people to that site so that they can then lend their support to you, much like people can use buymeacoffee.com/evoterra and lend some support to me. But there's a cost. One reason there's a cost is that's a zero-sum game placement, right? You can't talk about any other service while you're talking about whatever it is that you're using. So that service better work really well. It better be really well branded for your show, and it needs to be a smooth customer experience because it costs you to mention it. The same goes for how you drive people to your show, not on your show, but perhaps in social media. Your reputation is on the line when you send out a link to your show. It says, listen to this. What link are you using? Does that link make for a good experience for everyone? Because remember, it costs you every single time somebody clicks on it. Are you spending the money wisely, spending that cost wisely? To a lesser degree, the decisions you make on hosting, whether that's hosting your podcast episodes and generating your RSS feed or website hosting, those all cost you in reputation points as well as real money there. But to your listeners, it's reputation points. So you can blame the limitations of your inability to get your show episode details formatted properly on your website host. You can blame the lack of ability to put a link in because your podcast hosting company won't allow for that, but that's fine. Keep in mind, though, that your listeners are going to lay the blame at your feet. You're the one that made that choice. You're the one who are incurring those costs. If you promote your guest appearances on other podcasts, on your own podcast episode, that's costing you something. It's costing you something when just for them to hear about it, but also when they click through and listen. Was it your best show? Did that host do a good job of representing what you wanted to say? If you promote your upcoming speaking engagements on your podcast at a conference you're going to, that happens at a cost. Does that conference, live up to the values, the reputation that you yourself have? Because there's a cost when you say, I'm going here. Now, I say all of this not to tell you to stop saying and mentioning things on your podcast. That's not it at all. This is for you to realize that everything has a cost, whether it physically costs money out of your pocket or whether it costs you reputation points. Your job is to make sure that you're getting more value than the cost you're actually spending. And it's important that you really understand the full journey you're putting someone through when you mention a product, a service, or anything else really on your show. Because like it or not, you just made, with that mention, a tacit endorsement. So make sure it's worth it. Now, to that end, you'll notice something new in the article and the newsletter for today's episode and what you'll see in all of the episodes I put out this week. There's a new section, and it's called, currently, Supporting Shows Showcase. Yeah, I love my alliteration, don't I? This is a paid sponsorship opportunity that was conceived of, actually, by a listener, Tom Fox of the Compliance Podcast Network. Thank you, Tom. And naturally, Tom has acquired one of the spots in that sponsorship section to promote a new series he's just releasing called Looking Back on 9/11, which you should take a listen to. Also in there today, you're going to see a new show hosted by my partner, Sam Walker. It's called American Vigilante, which is going to be a gut punch over and over again, I really think. Looking forward to listening to that today. And there's also, there's one more, an inclusion by another one of my partners, Mr. Brian Barletta from Sounds Profitable, the podcast ad tech newsletter and podcast. You'll have more details about the, what I call it again, Supporting Shows Showcase if you go to podcastpontifications.com/sponsorship if you want to get in on some of that action. Let's do some boostergrams.
Now it's time for the Boostergram Corner.
Boostergram Corner.
I don't know a thing about crypto.
Well, just one boostergram actually today. Someone, and I don't know who, used Breeze, cool little app, but again, I don't know who, and they said in the message, "I'm just here for the boostergram corner." Smiley face. Well, thanks, whoever you happen to be, but I just don't know who you are, which is unfortunate. But thank you very much for the 1,000 sats, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money because sats are tiny amounts of money. Anyhow, if you got value out of today's program and you're using one of those fancy new podcast apps like Breeze, then feel free to boost some sats my way and send a message. I'll read it out here on the show. If that's too complicated, because wow, is that stuff really too complicated? Again, buymeacoffee.com/evoterra is where you can go to show your support for the program. That's it. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers.